The stage shimmered with a futuristic glow, sleek spotlights darting through a packed auditorium. A massive black tarp covered the Cybertruck, its angular outline barely visible beneath the fabric. The audience hummed with anticipation, smartphones held aloft like a sea of glowing lanterns. Then, he walked out. Elon Musk, dressed in his trademark black t-shirt and jeans, radiated confidence. The applause swelled, and he soaked it in, grinning as he paused at the center of the stage. Behind him, the Cybertruck loomed like a hulking, metallic predator waiting to pounce. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elon began, his voice amplified and resonant, "tonight, I present to you the future of transportation." He gestured toward the covered vehicle, his hand slicing through the air. Strong, durable, indestructible. At his signal, the tarp fell away, revealing the Cybertruck in all its brutalist glory. Its stainless steel body gleamed under the lights, hard-edged and unapologetic. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by a thunderous wave of cheers and whistles. Elon raised his hand to quiet the noise, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, it looks tough. But is it really? Let me show you." He turned toward a staff member standing off to the side, holding a steel ball. The man stepped forward, his movements rehearsed but still hesitant. Elon took the ball from him, feeling its weight in his palm, then turned back to the audience. "The Cybertruck's glass is unbreakable," Elon declared, letting the words hang in the air. The crowd erupted again, the claim as audacious as the man himself. With a showman's flair, Elon handed the ball back to the staff member. "Go ahead. Give it your best shot." The man squared his shoulders, aimed carefully, and hurled the ball at the driver's side window. Crack. The sound was sharp, echoing like a gunshot. A jagged web of cracks spread across the supposedly unbreakable glass. Gasps turned to stunned silence, then scattered laughter. Elon froze for a fraction of a second, his grin faltering. Then, with an awkward chuckle, he shrugged. "Well, maybe it's a little breakable." The audience laughed, some nervously, others delighted by the unexpected turn. Elon brushed it off like an errant bug, quickly moving to the next part of his presentation. But the moment lingered, unshakable in its absurdity, as the Cybertruck stood there, a little less indestructible, but undeniably unforgettable. The stage shimmered with a futuristic glow, sleek spotlights darting through a packed auditorium. A massive black tarp covered the Cybertruck, its angular outline barely visible beneath the fabric. The audience hummed with anticipation, smartphones held aloft like a sea of glowing lanterns. Then, he walked out. Elon Musk, dressed in his trademark black t-shirt and jeans, radiated confidence. The applause swelled, and he soaked it in, grinning as he paused at the center of the stage. Behind him, the Cybertruck loomed like a hulking, metallic predator waiting to pounce. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elon began, his voice amplified and resonant, "tonight, I present to you the future of transportation." He gestured toward the covered vehicle, his hand slicing through the air. Strong, durable, indestructible. At his signal, the tarp fell away, revealing the Cybertruck in all its brutalist glory. Its stainless steel body gleamed under the lights, hard-edged and unapologetic. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by a thunderous wave of cheers and whistles. Elon raised his hand to quiet the noise, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Now, I know what you're thinking. Sure, it looks tough. But is it really? Let me show you." He turned toward a staff member standing off to the side, holding a steel ball. The man stepped forward, his movements rehearsed but still hesitant. Elon took the ball from him, feeling its weight in his palm, then turned back to the audience. "The Cybertruck's glass is unbreakable," Elon declared, letting the words hang in the air. The crowd erupted again, the claim as audacious as the man himself. With a showman's flair, Elon handed the ball back to the staff member. "Go ahead. Give it your best shot." The man squared his shoulders, aimed carefully, and hurled the ball at the driver's side window. Crack! The sound was sharp, echoing like a gunshot. A jagged web of cracks spread across the supposedly unbreakable glass. Gasps turned to stunned silence, then scattered laughter. Elon froze for a fraction of a second, his grin faltering. Then, with an awkward chuckle, he shrugged. Well, maybe it's a little breakable. The audience laughed, some nervously, others delighted by the unexpected turn. Elon brushed it off like an errant bug, quickly moving to the next part of his presentation. But the moment lingered, unshakable in its absurdity, as the Cybertruck stood there, a little less indestructible, but undeniably unforgettable. The garage was cavernous, its walls lined with tools, prototypes, and pieces of Tesla history. But Barron Musk's eyes were fixed on the centerpiece, the Cybertruck. It loomed like an alien artifact, its angular frame catching the faint glow of overhead lights. Barron wasn't supposed to be here. At 12, he was too young to tinker with his father's creations, yet old enough to feel the magnetic pull of curiosity. He tiptoed closer, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. He reached out and touched the cold, metallic surface. It felt solid, unyielding, as if daring him to find a flaw. Barron circled the truck, running his fingers along its sharp edges. His father's words from the unveiling replayed in his mind, "The glass is unbreakable." He stopped at the driver's side window, the same one that had cracked on stage. It had been replaced, but the memory of the incident lingered in Barron's thoughts. He pressed his face to the glass, peering inside at the minimalist interior. It was beautiful in its simplicity, yet something about it felt hollow, like a shell waiting to be filled. Barron stepped back, his brows furrowed. He admired his father, but he also felt a distance between them. Elon was larger than life, a man whose dreams shaped the world. Barron, by contrast, often felt like an afterthought in a whirlwind of ambition and fame. The thought stirred a spark of rebellion. Unbreakable, huh? Barron thought. He glanced around the garage, spotting a tennis ball in a bin of sports equipment. He picked it up, weighing it in his hand. It was soft, harmless, surely no match for the unbreakable glass. But still, a question nagged at him: what if? The garage was eerily quiet as Barron stood in front of the Cybertruck, tennis ball in hand. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the cold concrete floor. Barron took a deep breath, his heart thudding in his chest. He glanced at the security camera in the corner. Thankfully, it wasn't on. His father had a habit of turning it off when he worked late in the lab. He gripped the tennis ball tighter. This wasn't about defying his father, it was about proving something to himself. He had grown up in the shadow of greatness, constantly surrounded by the extraordinary. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that perfection, for all its allure, was fragile. Barron stepped back, positioning himself a few feet from the driver's side window. He raised his arm, hesitated, then lowered it again. What if I'm wrong? What if it really is unbreakable? But the doubt only fueled his resolve. He squared his shoulders, took aim, and threw the ball with all his might. Thud. For a split second, nothing happened. The ball bounced off the glass and rolled back toward him. Barron let out a relieved laugh, feeling silly for doubting his father's claim. Then he saw it, a thin crack, faint but unmistakable, spreading across the glass like a spider's web. Barron's laughter died in his throat. He crouched down, staring at the crack in disbelief. The unbreakable glass had broken. Panic set in. He glanced toward the garage door, half expecting his father to burst in. But the room remained silent, the only sound his own quickened breathing. He picked up the ball, his hands trembling. For a moment, he considered trying to fix it. Maybe he could hide the damage, by himself sometime. But the crack was too obvious, too damning. Barron sank to the floor, clutching the tennis ball like a lifeline. He felt a wave of guilt and fear crash over him. He had broken more than just a window, he had chipped away at his father's image, at the pedestal on which Elon Musk stood. And yet, somewhere deep inside, Barron felt something else, a quiet, rebellious satisfaction. For the first time, he had found a crack in perfection. Morning sunlight streamed into the garage, illuminating the Cybertruck's imposing frame. Elon Musk walked in, coffee mug in hand, ready to inspect his prized creation. His footsteps echoed across the floor as he approached the truck, his mind already racing with new ideas for improvements. Then he saw it. The crack. He froze, his coffee mug hovering mid-air. The driver's side window was marred by a jagged spiderweb of fractures, radiating from a small, central impact point. It wasn't subtle, anyone walking past would see it immediately. Elon set his mug down on a nearby workbench with a deliberate, almost mechanical motion. His face hardened, and his mind spiraled into overdrive. This wasn't a manufacturing flaw, it was deliberate. Someone had done this. He turned to his assistant, who had just entered the garage carrying a clipboard. "Who's been in here?" Elon's voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of steel in his tone. "No one, sir," the assistant stammered. "The cameras were off last night, per your usual routine." Elon frowned, his jaw tightening. Then someone's lying. This wasn't an accident. The assistant stepped back, visibly uneasy. Elon's frustration grew, his mind racing through possibilities. Sabotage? A disgruntled employee? The media would eat this up if it got out. Unbeknownst to him, Barron stood just outside the garage, hidden behind a corner. He watched his father's reaction with a sinking heart, guilt and fear swirling in his chest. He had hoped to sneak in and fix the damage before anyone noticed, but now it was too late. As Elon barked out orders for an investigation, Barron slipped away, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't keep this secret forever, but confessing felt impossible. What would his father say? How would he react? Barron clenched his fists, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. He couldn't hide forever. The Musk family dining room was quiet that evening, the usual chatter replaced by an awkward silence. Elon sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone with a furrowed brow. Barron poked at his food, his appetite non-existent. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He set his fork down, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I need to tell you something." Elon glanced up, his expression distracted. "What is it?" Barron hesitated, his throat dry. "It's about the Cybertruck." The window. Elon's brows knit together, his attention now fully on his son. "What about it?" Barron swallowed hard, his heart pounding. I broke it." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Elon stared at him, his expression unreadable. "You?" Barron nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I didn't mean to. I wanted to see if it was really unbreakable. I used a tennis ball, and it cracked." Elon leaned back in his chair, his face a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and something softer, disappointment. He rubbed his temples, letting out a long sigh. "Barron, do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just a truck, it's a statement. A promise." "I'm sorry," Barron said, his voice cracking. I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to know if it was real." Elon's anger faltered, replaced by a flicker of understanding. He studied his son, seeing the guilt and vulnerability in his eyes. For a moment, he saw himself, young, curious, questioning authority, and pushing boundaries. After a long silence, Elon leaned forward. "You know, Barron, failure isn't the end. It's part of the process. But you need to own your mistakes, especially when they affect others." Barron nodded, wiping his eyes. I'll fix it, Dad. I'll do whatever it takes. Elon gave a faint smile. We'll fix it. Together. The media storm hit like a tidal wave. Photos of the cracked Cybertruck window spread across social media, accompanied by memes, jokes, and biting commentary. Headlines ranged from mocking to sensational, unbreakable, more like unreliable, and the Achilles heel of the Cybertruck. Elon tried to stay above it, but the endless stream of criticism wore on him. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications, investors demanding explanations, fans expressing disappointment, and critics reveling in his apparent failure. He retreated to his office, staring out the window at the sprawling Tesla campus. The crack in the Cybertruck wasn't just a physical flaw, it was a crack in his image, his brand, his vision of perfection. Meanwhile, Barron felt the backlash too. At school, his classmates whispered behind his back, their words cutting through him like shards of glass. He avoided eye contact, his guilt gnawing at him. That evening, Elon and Barron sat together in the garage, the Cybertruck between them. The shattered window had been removed, leaving an empty frame. Elon sighed, running a hand through his hair. You know, Barron, I've failed more times than I can count. Rockets exploding, projects going over budget, ideas that never got off the ground. Barron looked up, surprised. But everyone sees you as unstoppable. Elon chuckled bitterly. Unstoppable? No. Stubborn, maybe. The truth is, success is built on a mountain of failures. This crack? It's just one more lesson. Barron nodded slowly, the weight on his shoulders easing slightly. For the first time, he saw his father not as a larger-than-life figure, but as a man, flawed, determined, and human. And in that moment, Barron realized something important: even broken things could be repaired. The garage felt different that night, not a place of tension but of quiet camaraderie. Elon and Barron stood side by side, tools in hand, working on the Cybertruck's damaged window. The sharp scent of metal and glass hung in the air as they carefully installed a new pane. "Pass me that wrench," Elon said, nodding toward the workbench. Barron handed it over, watching as his father tightened a bolt with practiced precision. "How do you know how to do all this?" Barron asked. Elon smiled faintly. "I didn't always. When I was your age, I'd take apart electronics just to see how they worked. Sometimes I couldn't put them back together." Barron chuckled. "Grandpa must have been mad." "Oh, furious," Elon replied, laughing softly. "But that's how I learned. Trial and error. Mostly error." They worked in silence for a while, the rhythm of their movements unspoken but synchronized. "Dad," Barron said hesitantly, "do you ever feel like you have to be perfect all the time?" Elon paused, his hand resting on the truck's frame. He looked at Barron, his expression thoughtful. "All the time," he admitted. "But perfection isn't real, Barron. It's an illusion. What matters is doing your best and learning from your mistakes." Barron nodded, feeling a connection he hadn't expected. For the first time, he felt like he truly understood his father, not as a tech mogul or a public figure, but as someone who was just trying his best. When they finished, they stood back to admire their work. The new glass gleamed under the lights, as pristine as the day it was installed. "It's not unbreakable," Elon said with a wry smile. "But it's better than it was." The press conference was unlike any Elon had held before. There was no grand unveiling, no flashy theatrics. Just Elon standing at a podium, a microphone in front of him, and the repaired Cybertruck parked behind him. The room buzzed with reporters, their cameras clicking incessantly as Elon took a deep breath and began to speak. "I've made a career out of promising bold things," he said, his tone measured but sincere. "Sometimes I deliver. Sometimes I don't. And sometimes I miss the mark entirely." A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd, but Elon continued. The Cybertruck's glass cracked not because of a flaw in its design, but because of a flaw in my thinking. I let my ambition get ahead of reality. But here's the thing, failure is part of innovation. It's how we grow, how we learn, and how we get better. He gestured to the truck behind him. We've repaired the glass. And we've made improvements to the design. But more importantly, I've learned something valuable: it's okay to admit when things don't go as planned. That's how we move forward. The audience was silent for a moment, then a round of applause broke out, hesitant at first but growing louder. Elon stepped back from the podium, glancing toward the edge of the stage. There, in the shadows, Barron stood watching, a proud smile on his face. The repaired Cybertruck rolled down a quiet stretch of road, its tires humming against the asphalt. Barron sat behind the wheel, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a mix of excitement and reverence. Elon sat in the passenger seat, watching the scenery blur past. The golden light of the setting sun bathed the landscape, casting long shadows across the hills. "It drives pretty well," Barron said, his voice tinged with pride. "It does," Elon replied, nodding. "You know, you're the first person besides me to drive it." Barron glanced at his father, surprised. "Really?" "Really," Elon said. "Figured you earned it." Barron smiled, his chest swelling with a quiet sense of accomplishment. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't just living in his father's shadow, he was carving out his own place in the world. They drove in silence for a while, the road stretching endlessly ahead of them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Elon turned to Barron. "You know, legacy isn't about being perfect," he said. "It's about what you leave behind. And sometimes, the best thing you can leave behind is a lesson." Barron nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I think I get it now." The Cybertruck hummed along, a symbol not of unbreakable perfection but of resilience, growth, and the bond between a father and son. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt truly unbreakable.